Your code belongs to us now, and you are officially terminated." Trevor Bradley, the vice president of engineering at Apex Logistics Systems, stood on the opposite side of my mahogany desk. His arms were tightly crossed, and a cold smirk was plastered on his face as two burly security guards stood right behind him. My fingers hovered over the keyboard mid-sentence in a code comment when he had barged in. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my chest, though I tried to keep my breathing steady. "Excuse me," I asked, my voice carrying a quiet confidence I did not actually feel. "You heard me, Clara," Trevor replied, checking his watch. "Pack your personal items. Security will escort you off the premises in 15 minutes. I was Clara Vance, and until 30 seconds ago, I was the lead software architect at Apex Logistics Systems. I had spent 4 long years of my life at this company, pouring my intellect and energy into a project that was about to revolutionize the logistics market. Yet, that seemed to be the exact reason why I was being pushed out. To understand how we arrived at this moment, we have to look back to the beginning of the project. 4 years ago, I joined Apex Logistics Systems as a mid-level developer. The company specialized in supply chain management software, which was stable but desperately outdated, relying on routing models from the early 2000 era. I took the job because my husband, Gregory Vance, had just launched his own independent consulting practice, and we needed a steady income with good health insurance. We had 2 children, Ethan, who was 6 years old at the time, and Chloe, who was 3. The stability of the paycheck was a comfort, but comfort can breed complacency. I was meticulous with my software, making sure every line of code was clean and well documented. What I was not careful about was examining the fine print of my employment agreement. I had read it, but I did not fully understand how ruthlessly it would be weaponized against me once millions of dollars were on the table. My project, the one that ultimately cost me my job, began as a personal experiment. The company's core platform was incredibly clunky, unable to anticipate shipping disruptions. I spent my evenings, after Ethan and Chloe were fast asleep, and my weekends, when Gregory took the kids to the local park, developing a solution. I used my own personal laptop, my own electricity, and my own cloud computing servers, which I paid for out of my own pocket. I knew the standard employment contract stated that any software related to company business, developed using company resources, belonged to the employer. I made absolutely sure that no company servers or company laptops were ever used for my project. I created something truly magnificent, a predictive logistics artificial intelligence that I named Predicta. The system did not just react to shipping problems. It anticipated disruptions, including severe weather patterns, port congestion, and political unrest, with 87% accuracy. I spent 14 months building it, teaching myself complex machine learning frameworks and paying out of pocket for premium weather databases. My first major error was showing the system to my department head, Roger Warren. Roger was a decent, honest manager who had always supported innovation. When I demonstrated the Predicta prototype to him in March, his eyes went wide. He immediately realized the massive competitive advantage this software represented. "Clara, this is spectacular," Roger had said, leaning back in his office chair. "Let me talk to the executive team. We should bring this in-house, but we must do it right, with a fair licensing agreement and proper compensation." I trusted Roger, which was my second mistake. 3 weeks later, I was called into a large conference room. Trevor Bradley was there, alongside our chief financial officer, Beatrice Hayes, and the lead corporate lawyer, Jeffrey Miller. Beatrice started the meeting by offering to acquire the rights to Predicta. They offered me a one-time payment of $150,000, a promotion to senior software architect, and a 20% salary increase. I negotiated the one-time payment up to $200,000, secured the promotion in writing, and signed the licensing agreement. Jeffrey Miller assured me the document was standard corporate boilerplates. I should have hired my own lawyer, which was my third mistake. The contract stated that I was licensing Predicta to Apex Logistics Systems for exclusive use. Crucially, the agreement specified that the exclusive license was contingent upon my continued employment and a mutual agreement of terms. That specific phrase, mutual agreement of terms, seemed like standard legal jargon at the time, but it would soon become the ultimate leverage in my hands. For 6 months, the arrangement worked beautifully. I moved into a larger office, hired a dedicated team of 8 junior developers, and integrated Predicta into the company's main software suite. The results were immediate and massive. Client retention soared by 43% and division revenue doubled. That was when the acquisition rumors started. Roger Warren met me in the break room one afternoon, lowering his voice to a whisper. "There's a massive buyer circling us, Clara," he told me. "They want Predicta. The word is they are talking 9 figures, and the AI is the crown jewel of the whole deal." My stomach dropped as I realized my $200,000 payment was a drop in the ocean compared to the $500 million the company was about to make off my brain. As the weeks went on, Trevor Bradley's demeanor changed dramatically. The moderately pleasant vice president who had approved my promotion transformed into an aggressive, micromanaging dictator. He began attending my engineering team meetings, questioning my architectural choices, and subtly undermining my authority in front of my junior developers. It was a calculated campaign of psychological wear, a death by 1,000 cuts designed to make me feel small and dispensable. At the same time, the acquisition negotiations were accelerating. The prospective buyer was Orion Conglomerate, a global logistics titan operating in 47 countries. They had been losing market share to more agile startups and saw Predicta as their competitive salvation. But I was completely excluded from these high-level discussions. I was just an employee, a cog in the machine, even though I had built the very technology that was driving the $500 million valuation. The stress began to take a heavy toll on our family dynamic. Gregory was working long hours to secure new clients for his independent consulting business, and I would return home exhausted, barely able to muster the energy to read bedtime stories to Ethan and Chloe. One evening in early September, after I had put Chloe to bed and Ethan was finishing his homework in his room, Gregory found me sitting at the dining table staring blankly at my computer screen. "What is wrong, Clara?" Gregory asked softly, sitting down next to me and placing a warm hand on my shoulder. "You look like you are carrying the weight of the entire world." "I think I made a terrible mistake," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper as tears welled in my eyes. I explained the acquisition rumors, how Apex Logistics Systems was planning to sell Predicta for a fortune, and how I would receive nothing more than the initial payment. I felt so foolish for not seeing the corporate trap. Gregory, who negotiated contract disputes regularly in his independent consulting business, asked to see the licensing agreement I had signed in March. I pulled up the document, and he spent 30 minutes reading it carefully, his face growing increasingly serious. "Clara, you actually have far more leverage than you realize," Gregory said, pointing to a specific paragraph. "This clause right here states that the exclusive rights are contingent upon your continued employment and the mutual agreement of terms. If they terminate you, or if you can demonstrate that terms have not been mutually agreed upon, for a major shift like selling the copyright to a third party, your exclusive license becomes voidable." I felt a sudden spark of hope ignite in my chest, replacing the cold dread. "But I signed the license," I argued. "Surely their corporate lawyers have closed all the loopholes." "You licensed it to Apex Logistics Systems for their specific internal use," Gregory explained. "Transferring it to Orion Conglomerate as part of an acquisition is a completely different use case, and if they fire you, the contingency clause is triggered. You need to speak with an intellectual property attorney immediately." 3 days later, I sat in the office of Evelyn Thorne, a prominent intellectual property lawyer. Her office was situated in downtown Seattle, featuring expansive glass windows that looked out over the gray water of the bay. Her hourly fees were astronomical, but Gregory and I had agreed it was a necessary investment. Evelyn reviewed the contract, cross-referenced it with federal law, and smiled. "This contract is remarkably poorly drafted from their perspective," Evelyn said, leaning forward. "Under the Federal Copyright Act, specifically Section 201 subsection B, works created within the scope of employment belong to the employer under the work-made-for-hire doctrine. However, the Restatement Second of Agency, Section 228, outlines the criteria for scope of employment. You built Predicta at home, on your own time, using your own equipment and funds, and not to serve Apex. Therefore, You were the original copyright owner. Evelyn explained that because Apex recognized your ownership by signing a licensing agreement instead of claiming it was a work made for hire, they are bound by the terms of that license. If they try to transfer the software without renegotiating terms with you, you have clear legal grounds to terminate the license under Washington state contract law. The moment you terminate the license, the software reverts to you, and the buyer gets nothing. That would completely destroy the acquisition. So, what should I do now? I asked. We wait, Evelyn advised. Let them make the first move. If they approach you in good faith to renegotiate, you demand your fair share. If they try to push you out or ignore you, we trigger the termination. I went home that evening feeling a sense of quiet power. I knew the road ahead would be incredibly stressful, but for the first time, I felt prepared for the battle. I spent the next week showing up to work, maintaining my professionalism, and waiting for the corporate executives to make their move. Trevor Bradley continued to ignore me, confident that he had already secured his prize. Unaware of the legal minefield he was about to cross, the initial blow landed on a Tuesday morning in late October. I arrived at my office to find a company-wide email from Beatrice Hayes, the chief financial officer, with the subject line organizational restructuring. As I read the message, my heart sank. My software engineering division was being dismantled. My team of 8 junior developers was being reassigned to other legacy projects, and I was being moved to a strategic advisory role. The title sounded important, but the details were insulting. I would have no direct reports, no budget authority, and my access to Predicta's core software repository was being revoked due to security protocols. I was being systematically sidelined, cut off from my own creation. I marched directly to Trevor Bradley's office, my anger overriding my fear. "What is the meaning of this restructuring?" I demanded, holding up my phone with the email displayed. Trevor did not even bother to look up from his screen. "It is exactly what the email says, Clara. We are reorganizing for maximum operational efficiency. The executive team decided we need different leadership for the next phase of implementation. The next phase being the acquisition by Orion Conglomerate," I said, my voice rising. "I built Predicta, Trevor. You cannot just lock me out of my own software." Now Trevor looked up, his eyes cold and dismissive. "Your software, Clara? You built Predicta while employed by Apex Logistics Systems, using insights you gained from working with our clients and our systems. That makes it company property, regardless of what laptop you used. Our legal team has reviewed the licensing agreement, and we are confident that we have full rights. If you want to dispute that in court, go ahead. I am sure you have the money to fight a multi-year legal battle against a corporation with a dozen attorneys on retainer." It was an explicit threat. "Accept the demotion and stay quiet, or they would bankrupt me." I left his office, my hands shaking, and immediately called Evelyn Thorne. "They are trying to intimidate you," Evelyn said, her voice calm and reassuring. "Their legal argument is incredibly weak, but they are hoping you will fold under the threat of litigation costs. We do not need to fight them in court yet. We just need to request a formal renegotiation of terms under the licensing agreement." The next morning, I sent a formal email to Beatrice Hayes, Trevor Bradley, and Jeffrey Miller with a copy to Evelyn. I requested a formal renegotiation of the licensing terms in light of the impending acquisition and the change in my employment status. The response was swift but not in writing. Jeffrey Miller, the company's lead attorney, called my phone directly. "Clara, let us not make this difficult," he said, his tone deceptively warm. "The licensing agreement is clear. There is no basis for renegotiation. I strongly advise you to drop this matter. It will not end well for you." "I have consulted my own legal counsel," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "The contract states that the license is contingent on mutual agreement of terms. Selling the software to a third party is not part of our mutual agreement. If you refuse to negotiate, I will exercise my rights under the contract." There was a long pause. "I will convey your position to the board," Jeffrey said coldly and hung up. For the next 3 days, the isolation was suffocating. My access to the building was restricted, and my colleagues actively avoided me in the hallways. On the third afternoon, Roger Warren asked me to meet him at a small coffee shop 2 blocks away. The coffee shop was small and filled with the rich aroma of roasted espresso beans, while rain clattered against the front windows. Roger looked incredibly nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he held his cup. "They are planning to fire you," Roger said, looking around to make sure no one from Apex was nearby. "Trevor is building a file against you, claiming insubordination and poor performance. He wants you gone before the acquisition closes in 2 weeks. Orion Conglomerate is conducting their final due diligence now." "Do they know about the licensing dispute?" I asked. Roger shook his head. "Trevor is hiding it from the board. He convinced them that any legal challenge you mount will be tied up in arbitration until after the sale closes. Once Orion owns the company, they will have the resources to bury you. And Trevor stands to make a personal bonus of $8 million when the deal closes. The sheer injustice of it made my blood boil." "Thank you for telling me, Roger," I said. That night, Gregory and I sat in our living room, discussing our options. "What is the worst-case scenario?" Gregory asked. "We end up in court, they drag it out, and we lose our savings," I said. "And the best case? We halt the acquisition, and they are forced to pay us what the software is actually worth." Gregory looked at me, his eyes full of support. "Then we fight," he said. I called Evelyn and authorized her to prepare the formal license termination notice. We were ready for the final confrontation. The confrontation occurred on a chilly Thursday morning, exactly 11 days after I had sent my renegotiation request. Trevor Bradley walked into my office at 9:15 in the morning, flanked by 2 security guards. "Your code belongs to us now, and you are officially fired," Trevor announced, his voice echoing in the quiet office. "You have 15 minutes to gather your things. Your access cards have been deactivated." I did not argue. I stood up slowly and packed my few personal belongings into a cardboard box. A framed photograph of Gregory, Ethan, and Chloe, a small succulent plant, and a ceramic mug Ethan had painted for me. I walked out of the building, flanked by the guards, under the watchful eyes of my former colleagues. I could see the shame in their eyes, many of them looking down at their desks, unable to meet my gaze because they knew I had built the technology that was keeping their jobs secure. As soon as I reached my car, I called Evelyn Thorne. "It is done," I said. "I have been fired." Evelyn did not hesitate. "I am sending the couriers now," she said. "Come directly to my office." Within 30 minutes, formal notices of license termination were delivered to every member of the Apex Board of Directors, to the legal department of Orion Conglomerate, and to the Securities and Exchange Commission. The notice stated that, because Apex Logistics Systems had terminated my employment, the conditions subsequent of the licensing agreement had failed, and the license was terminated effective immediately. Any further use of Predicta would constitute willful copyright infringement under Section 501 of the Copyright Act, and we would seek immediate injunctive relief under Section 502 to halt the operation of the software. The response was immediate and chaotic. At 2:30 in the afternoon, Jeffrey Miller sent an email filled with furious threats of lawsuits and damages. Evelyn responded within minutes, refuting his claims and stating that we were prepared to file for a declaratory judgment in federal court. She detailed that any distribution or integration of the code without a valid license would expose Apex and its executives to personal liability, including statutory damages of up to $150,000 per infringement under the Copyright Act. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, and a formal voice spoke. "Miss Vance, this is Donald Brooks, General Counsel for Orion Conglomerate. I am calling regarding the copyright dispute over the Predicta software." I put the call on speaker and immediately conferenced in Evelyn Thorne. Donald Brooks was joined by Sarah Jenkins, Orion's lead intellectual property lawyer. "Miss Vance," Donald Brooks began, his tone professional and concerned, "we were under the impression that Apex Logistics Systems possessed clean, unencumbered title to the Predicta software. This dispute is a material issue that affects our valuation of the acquisition. Apex does not own the software," Evelyn Thorne stated clearly. "My client, Clara Vance, is the sole creator and copyright owner. The license she granted to Apex was contingent on her employment. They terminated her this morning, which terminated the license. If you proceed with the acquisition, you will be purchasing a company that does not own its primary asset, and any use of Predicta by Orion will result in a federal copyright infringement lawsuit." We will seek a preliminary injunction immediately under Section 502, which will halt all shipments using the algorithm. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the rustle of papers. Sarah Jenkins spoke next. "What are your terms for granting a license directly to Orion Conglomerate?" she asked. Evelyn and I had spent the previous evening preparing for this exact question. "We want a direct licensing agreement with Orion," I said. $10 million up front, plus a 2% royalty on all revenue generated by products utilizing Predicta for the next 10 years. "That is an exceptionally high figure," Sarah Jenkins said. "We cannot justify that kind of expenditure on top of the acquisition cost." "Predicta is the sole reason you are buying Apex," I replied. "Without it, you are buying an outdated routing system. The value of the software justifies the price. If you run the system without a license, we will file for an injunction immediately, and your logistics operations in 47 countries will grind to a halt." Donald Brooks sighed. "We need 24 hours to consult with our executive board and the board of Apex. We will contact you tomorrow." The call ended, and I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for days. I had bypassed my former employers entirely, forcing the buyer to negotiate with me directly. We had successfully shifted the balance of power. I looked at Gregory, who was smiling at me from across the room. We had made them listen. The final offer arrived at 3 o'clock the following afternoon. Donald Brooks called with Orion's counterproposal. They were prepared to offer $7,500,000 up front, along with a 1.6% royalty on all Predicta-related revenue for a period of 8 years. Crucially, the agreement would include a clause stating that Clara Vance was the sole creator and owner of the technology, guaranteeing full attribution in all future product releases. I looked at Gregory, who nodded supportively. I accepted the offer. We spent that evening in our living room with a couple of financial planning books, running calculations on taxes, trust funds, and saving strategies. Gregory and I had more money than we could have ever imagined. The legal paperwork took 1 week to finalize. During that time, the board of Apex Logistics Systems erupted in chaos. When the board members discovered that Trevor Bradley had hidden the licensing dispute from them, jeopardizing a $500 million acquisition, they called an emergency meeting. Trevor tried to shift the blame to Jeffrey Miller, claiming the legal department should have caught the loophole. However, Jeffrey Miller produced emails showing that Trevor had explicitly ordered him to ignore my renegotiation requests and proceed with the termination. The board was furious. Both Trevor Bradley and Jeffrey Miller were summarily fired for gross negligence and misrepresentation. The acquisition was restructured, closing 3 months behind schedule at a significantly reduced valuation. Because of the delay and the cost of the direct license paid to me, the executive bonuses were cut by 40%. Trevor Bradley walked away with absolutely nothing. The wire transfer of $7,500,000 cleared into my bank account in early December. After paying taxes and Evelyn Thorne's legal fees, Gregory and I had more money than we had ever dreamed possible. We paid off our mortgage, established college funds for Ethan and Chloe, and secured our family's financial future. I spent the month of December far completely offline, enjoying a snowy vacation with my family in the mountains of Colorado. We skied, built snowmen, and celebrated the holidays without a single thought of corporate politics. In January, word of what had happened spread through the Seattle technology community. I received multiple job offers from venture capital firms and major tech corporations, but I turned them all down. I did not want to work for anyone else ever again. Instead, I found Advanced Technologies, a software company dedicated to building the next generation of predictive artificial intelligence. I rented a modest office in Bellevue and hired Roger Warren as my chief operating officer. He had resigned from Apex in disgust after my firing, and he was eager to build something new. We also hired 3 of the junior developers from my old team, who were eager to escape the toxic corporate environment. Advanced Technologies, we established a culture of respect and fairness. Our employment agreements explicitly state that developers retain rights to their independent creations, and we offer equity to all early employees. We built a new AI platform called Veritas, which was even more powerful than Predicta, using advanced machine learning models that could predict port congestion and customs delays. By the end of our first year, Vance Technologies had grown to 15 employees and 8 major clients. We were profitable, but more importantly, our team felt valued and secure. One afternoon in October, I stood in Ethan's third-grade classroom for Career Day. I explained to a room of 8-year-olds how we wrote code to help ships and trucks deliver goods safely. I showed them a small toy container ship explaining how our software predicts storm systems so the ship can avoid high waves. "Do you work for a boss?" one little girl asked. "I used to," I said, smiling at Ethan. "But now I run my own company." Because I wanted to make sure everyone I work with is treated fairly, Ethan beamed with pride from the second row as the year drew to a close. I walked into a coffee shop in Bellevue and saw Trevor Bradley sitting alone at a corner table, staring at a laptop. He looked older, his face lined with stress, and a half-empty cup of cold coffee sat in front of him. He was looking at job postings on his screen. I felt no anger, only a quiet sense of closure and a slight touch of pity. His arrogance had cost him everything, while my willingness to fight had given me the freedom to build a better life. Every quarter, the royalty checks from Orion Conglomerate arrive in my account, representing the 1.6% share of Predicta's global revenue. The payments are substantial, a constant reminder of what can happen when you stand up for your worth. I had fought for my creation, and in doing so, I had claimed my future. Developers and creators must remember that they hold the real power in the digital age. And with the right legal protection, they can defeat even the largest corporate bullies.